I was just talking to an audio engineer who's transitioning from studio sound to the touring world, the live sound world where I work. And he was having some issues, and this conversation comes up all the time. He knows how to mix. Knowing what he wanted it to sound like wasn't the problem. Balancing instruments and building a mix wasn't the problem. It was more that the infrastructure of the live music environment is just different. Just the fact of having speakers in the same room as the microphones makes some things we do in the studio not really translate to a live performance. And we got into the concept of kind of mixing into a box, like finding a place for every instrument in the box, which is defined by the limitations of the medium, like a stereo audio file. And in the studio, you often want this box to kind of sound as big as possible. You want to create an immersive experience for the listener. But I think mixing live is a bit different. We are almost always dealing with not ideal acoustic environments at concerts. And even though modern PA systems can sound really, really good, it's not like each and every person in the audience has a studio listening experience. So I try to think of making that box smaller, so once it's boosted way up to 100 dB or whatever, the loudness and immersiveness are there just by nature of being loud, but it's more controlled. Of course, this is just my philosophy on live mixing, and certainly many engineers are going to say, don't ever make that box smaller, but that is my mindset when I'm mixing live. So in this video, I'm going to show you 3 mixing approaches, and each of these not only helps keep the mix controlled, they also help prevent feedback, which of course is a massive, massive plus. First, we'll touch on high-pass filters and how we use them aggressively. Then we'll talk about EQ techniques using mostly subtractive EQ, and we'll also discuss proper gain structure on the inputs. So most live engineers use high-pass filters pretty aggressively, like way more than in the studio. I usually high-pass guitars up to 130 or 150 hertz, and vocals up to 170 or 180 or even 200 hertz. And obviously this all depends on the style of music and how it all sounds in the mix, but I really do push these high-pass filters as high as I can for each and every channel. It's so common for a live mix to get muddy very quickly, and I hear it all the time. I've stood watching muddy, boomy shows that could really have sounded way, way, way better with just a couple of high-pass filters. Plus, the front-of-house mix position quite often is super inaccurate with the low frequencies, so it can be hard to tell exactly what's going on in the audience, which is why I'm always trying to get out into the crowd to hear how the mix is translating in different parts of the room. So, apart from high-pass filters, the second thing that differs from the studio is just how we use EQ in general. Like 95% of my EQ moves are cuts, subtractive EQ. If I do end up boosting anything at all, it's usually just a tiny bit of high end to add a little brightness, but just a little bit. And when I do make EQ cuts, it's often pretty drastic. You might be able to really hear a 3 dB cut through studio monitors, but might need to cut 3 times or 4 times that much to get the same effect live. Of course, this isn't always appropriate, but some of my input channel EQs do end up looking totally crazy. In the studio, I might choose a different mic or move it around, but in live sound, we don't always have that option. We're just dealing with what's coming at us from stage, so the EQ can get a little drastic. It's really all about cutting the frequencies you don't like instead of boosting stuff that you want to pop out. And this really helps with controlling feedback. I mean, adding 6 dB of EQ gain on a microphone is like pushing the fader another 6 dB in that frequency range, which is going to come out of the speakers at some point and potentially feedback. Unless you're mixing in-ear monitors. Then it's a whole different thing, and it's way more like mixing in the studio. You're trying to create an immersive experience for the performers on stage, and they have these tiny drivers right in their ears, so the mixing technique is definitely different. All right, so high-pass filtering and subtractive EQ are important, but the third and probably most important thing is the gain structure at the inputs of the mixing console. In the studio, if you want a hotter sound and cranking the input gain way up on the mic pre sounds good, then you're going to do that. But generally speaking, this is terrible practice in live sound. If all of your faders are at unity, the input gains should be pretty balanced so that the mix is mostly there. You might have to push the vocals or the drums a bit on the faders, but generally balancing all of your input gains helps keep the rest of your signal chain under control. Once the signals are in the mixer, they get sent all over the place to different speakers, to monitors, to recording devices, or whatever. And managing all of this is so much easier when the mix is mostly built right at that first gain stage. Okay, so I'm going to share one more advanced trick here in a second, but those three approaches, aggressive high-pass filtering, subtractive EQ, and good gain structure on your inputs, are all super critical in live sound. But my little pro tip, my advanced trick here, is dynamic EQ, which is sometimes called active EQ, and I tend to use this a lot. It's really a go-to for me. Dynamic EQ is frequency-specific compression, meaning that it will only compress the very specific frequency ranges that you tell it to and not the entire signal. If an instrument sounds totally fine at low volumes and then has a really annoying quality when it gets super loud over the PA, I'll just compress that very specific problem frequency range. Like if a kick drum gets really clicky when the drummer starts laying into it, I'll just compress the high mids, quite often at a pretty high compression ratio, to prevent that from jumping out. Now I might add a much lighter compression for the overall kick sound, but I don't want to affect the overall dynamics too much, even if I'm clamping down on the click with a high compression ratio. It's just another way of trying to get things to translate well at high volumes. Okay, thanks for watching. Subscribe right here for more fun audio stuff from the Production Academy, and check out this playlist next. I'm Scott, and I'll see you in the next video.